Um, Sego sewa gwego, dahnuhiate yungyats Akwesasronon. My name is Abraham Francis, and I'm Dear Glenn from Akwesasne, and I was given the honor to do the opening for all of you, and I appreciate you taking this time to listen to me. So, and when I say Tony Otohakne and Guatnigula, the appropriate response to that is To, that you're in agreement to bringing our minds together to acknowledge this aspect of creation. So, Agwego aska de dawahwet nuni ne Guatnigula dono de tenuholados ne ungwet su a Tony Otohakne and Guatnigula. Agwego aska de dawahwet nuni ne Guatnigula dono de tenuholados ne yakit nishtaha hunja Tony Otohakne and Guatnigula. Agwego aska de dawahwet nuni ne Guatnigula dono de tenuholados ne onunqua su a Tony Otohakne and Guatnigula. Agwego aska de dawahwet nuni ne Guatnigula dono de tenuholados ne gajat su a Tony Otohakne and Guatnigula. Agwego aska de dawahwet nuni ne Guatnigula dono de tenuholados ne orla su a Tony Otohakne and Guatnigula. Agwego aska de dawahwet nuni ne Guatnigula dono de tenuholados ne ahundet su a Tony Otohakne and Guatnigula. Agwego aska de dawahwet nuni ne Guatnigula dono de tenuholados ne onunqua su a Tony Otohakne and Guatnigula. Agwego aska de dawahwet nuni ne Guatnigula dono de tenuholados ne Gayan Tusala Tony Otohakne and Guatnigula. Agwego aska de dawahwet nuni ne Guatnigula dono de tenuholados ne Gondilio Tony Otohakne and Guatnigula. Agwego aska de dawahwet nuni ne Guatnigula dono de tenuholados ne Ogwelet su a Tony Otohakne and Guatnigula. Agwego aska de dawahwet nuni ne Guatnigula dono de tenuholados ne Ojida agu a Tony Otohakne and Guatnigula. Agwego aska de dawahwet nuni ne Guatnigula dono de tenuholados ne Gaeli Nigawelage Tony Otohakne and Guatnigula. Agwego aska de dawahwet nuni ne Guatnigula dono de tenuholados ne Ladiwelas Tony Otohakne and Guatnigula. Agwego aska de dawahwet nuni ne Guatnigula dono de tenuholados ne asutan oh my goodness. Sungwaji gyoke nekwa galakwa Tony Otohakne and Guatnigula. Agwego aska de dawahwet nuni ne Guatnigula dono de tenuholados ne asutaneka galakwa Tony Otohakne and Guatnigula. Agwego aska de dawahwet nuni ne Guatnigula dono de tenuholados ne Ojistokwa Lunyo Tony Otohakne and Guatnigula. Agwego aska de dawahwet nuni ne Guatnigula dono de tenuholados ne Gaeli Negawelage Niongwedege Tony Otohakne and Guatnigula. Agwego aska de dawahwet nuni ne Guatnigula dono de tenuholados ne Sungwatizo Tony Otohakne and Guatnigula. Ona gadi niole yatet wal yalo dogatano Sungwatnigula ize gine ona sasa wakwata kohado Tony Otohakne and Guatnigula. Daneto.
To, and thank you, Abe, Abe Francis, for starting us off. My name is Jeff Rydell, Executive Director of the River Institute, and good morning, everyone, and happy to welcome everyone to the River Institute's 27th Annual Symposium and our first virtual one. And for the past 27 years, we have started the annual symposium with those words of traditional words of thanksgiving from our partners at Akwesasne. And we begin this event by acknowledging that many of us are living on unceded land and traditional territory of Indigenous peoples. We are grateful for the opportunity to live where we do, and we thank all generations of people who have contributed to their responsibilities to Mother Earth since time immemorial. So this is our 27th Annual Symposium. I'm happy to have you all attend, and although I can't see your smiling faces, I'm very happy to have you with us. The River Institute has been hosting this event over these years. It's a nonprofit charitable organization dedicated to research, education, and community outreach on the St. Lawrence River ecosystem. It was founded 26 years ago, and so our first symposium was even before we were founded, and the first year before we were founded. And it was our very first outreach initiative, and I think it's pretty amazing that we've been able to keep this going, and I guess this year really shows that we're very determined to do so. The annual symposium aims to bring together a wide spectrum of interested parties, and it has over the years achieved this. This is including scientists, educators, policymakers, community leaders, business and industry representatives, and then of course citizens interested in the river. And we explore issues and challenges facing large rivers and their watersheds. So this year, our focus will be on river health, past, present, and future. So yesterday we kicked off the symposium with our community day, and we were treated to some very engaging presentations, discussions, question and answer periods, and even some river inspired music. Today, the second day of the River Symposium, is our Science Day. We focus on the science today. So activities will include our featured presentations by, we'll get to hear from Abe again from the Mohawk Council of Akwesasronon, Dr. Stephen Cook, fish ecology expert from Carleton University, Finn Donnelly from the Rivershed Society of British Columbia, and many other presentations by experts and researchers. So please review the schedule and join us when you can, wherever you are, for any or all of the sessions that interest you. What I'd like to do now is introduce the lady who was organizing this conference for 26 years and taken a bit of a break this year, but is someone I think many people who have attended our conferences over the years know well, and that is Christina Collard. Christina?
Morning, everybody, and thanks, Jeff. And before I just say a few words, I feel like it's Groundhog Day because I said these words yesterday. But when it's a two-day event and there's people that we don't know who are participating, then it's always great to do things twice. So Jeff Rydell and I have been working together for 25 years, and I just want to say we would have liked to have a bigger splash for Jeff. We did celebrate his 25th anniversary with our board of directors, virtually, of course. So we just want to thank Jeff for his leadership and dedication and help grow the organization for the past 25 years. So kudos to you, Jeff, and thank you again for hanging out with me for all these years. So welcome and thank you everybody for participating at the River Institute Symposium. I'm Christina Collard. I'm the program leader of administration and fundraising, and I was also, as Jeff mentioned, the conference coordinator for 25 years. 25 years. The first one was through Ottawa U. And I'm lucky this year to hand it over. I was participating in the committee as a guide and a sounding board when needed, but Dr. Lee McGahee, who you'll meet next, has taken over the reins and actually worked as a committee this year with the staff to coordinate the event, and countless hours goes into these events. Lots of staff because you're organizing, and especially with this online technology, it's new for us, and with COVID things were challenging, but we had a great day yesterday. It was awesome. Our panel discussion, our speakers, you know, I got a chance to sit back and relax and enjoy it, and I think it's going to go really well today. So congratulations to the River Institute staff, the committee, and without the organization having the presenters, we wouldn't have a symposium. So of course, thank you to all the presenters today for making this symposium possible. And so we are grateful to acknowledge our sponsors as well. Without financial support to support us, these events wouldn't be possible. So we have a couple of sponsors up here on the board. So TV Canada Trust for hosting our fish tank competition yesterday, which was a high school group of kids were getting together behind the scenes. So that was really fun to engage them in our symposium. We have RBC Foundation, Green for Life, St. Lawrence Seaway Management Corporation, Ontario Power Generation, Seaway Development Corporation, Ingredion, and the International Joint Commission. So all these sponsors have been following us for years and years and years. And we also want to acknowledge our partners at the Mohawk Council of Akwesasne, who are dedicated partners as well over the years to support our event with their partnership. So just before we begin, if at any time you have any problems with technology or information, you're welcome to send an email to support@riverinstitute.ca, and Louis or one of our staff members will be happy to support or help you. And also just to let everybody know that the event is fully recorded. So if by chance you get cut off, your internet gets cut off, just don't worry about it. You can go back to the event and see it on our website in a couple of days or next week, depending on how organized we are. So stay tuned. We'll email everybody and let them know when the recording is ready. And anyhow, thank you so much again for being here today. And I want to hand it over to my colleague and friend, Dr. Lee McGahey.
Thanks so much, Christina. And it's great to be here. And yes, yesterday was great. And I also want to reiterate to say thank you to everyone on the committee for everything you've done, and to Natasha Pazega for developing the website for us, and for the education team for everything they did yesterday, and everyone who pulled the community day together. And I'm looking forward to today. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. So you'll notice that there's a question and answer box. You're welcome to ask your questions there throughout the day. Please let us know that you're attending, where you are, put your name in there. It's always nice for the speakers to know who's out there. Otherwise, we're not sure who's in attendance, even though we know how many. Today we have 4 sessions, so this is the first of 4. The second one starts at 10 o'clock and goes until 12. It starts off with Stephen Cook, and then we have 4 talks after that. We have a break over lunchtime. The next session starts at 1 o'clock and goes until 3 o'clock, and then we encourage you to join us for the last session starting at 3 and ending at 4:30. So that's what's happening today. There's some posters up on the website too, so if you go to the Science Day link, you can follow that to look at the posters we have up. And we had booths participating yesterday where you could meet people in the live space, but today you can still look at the booth page. There's some videos up there if you're interested, and also links to websites. And now I get to introduce Abraham Francis. Abe, we're so happy to have you here today. Thank you for joining us. Abram is the acting head of the environment program at MCA, and I've had the privilege of working with Abe over the last year, and it's been really wonderful, and I was so happy when he agreed to come and talk to us today. So Abe is talking about the St. Lawrence River, Akwesasronon relationships across time, and we're looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Welcome.
Thank you, Lee, for the introduction. I really appreciate it. I wanted to take a moment to just acknowledge all of the River Institute for all they do with us and support us. I'm incredibly appreciative to their open-mindedness and care with us. This is really one of those meaningful relationships that is really important to the way that I do my work. So I'm really appreciative. And so I wanted to take another quick moment to mention that I want people to just take a moment to relax and just listen. You guys are being introduced to somewhat of a rough draft of some ideas that I've been trying to put into, speak into existence. It's over a year's worth of thoughts and built on decades of experience and being Akwesasronon. And it's going to continue to grow and change, and I'm basically setting forth what I hope to do, what has been done, where we are, and then where we hope to go someday. And so I will get started. So I wanted to start with a quote by Dr. Carol Warrior, who was a mentor of mine at Cornell University. Form is a temporary expression of energy or vibrations. These pulsing oscillations cycle through birth, life, death, renewal, and again life. Akwesasne is at the heart of my work. Akwesasne is more than just a location for me. My community is full of stories to tell that transcend time. This land knows these stories, recited across generations for thousands of years or time immemorial, connecting Akwesasne to this land. Embedded within these stories are teachings that outline the roles and responsibilities of Akwesasronon with each other and their non-human kin, which is one of the mechanisms that oral tradition sustains intergenerational knowledge. A beautiful aspect of the teaching is that they are dynamic and adaptable to changing circumstances, which are powerful tools for us to live healthier and happier lives. At this moment, I'm reflecting on the story of Ganyat-Dalawa-Nene, or the St. Lawrence River, which we are watching unfold before our eyes. Time, viewed from a colonial perspective, is linear. Unlike indigenous concepts, time from an indigenous paradigm is a malleable substance and relational. On a front porch over some cigarettes, Carol told me about indigenous time being like a string, and 2 points can be brought together at any time. Indigenous people have tools to reach across time into what is called the past and the future. But I'm not here to discuss all the tools that beyond stories and connections to land. Additionally, time for indigenous people needs to be seen more than when Christopher Columbus arrived in the Americas. As Donnell Fixico described, indigenous time is a body, and settlers' arrival on this land is only a finger of that time span. These metaphors shared with me strongly influence my perspectives on time. Our history on this land is so much more than the short colonial history that currently dominates the narrative. This history is incredibly valuable to the practice of science. Henry Lickers described it as having a very long data set. Indigenous people know these lands and can access this knowledge through stories that reach across time and connect us to our ancestors and future generations. In Akwesasne's recent history, the story of Ganyat-Dalawa-Nene shifted towards fear and anger. The fear and anger are justified because the river and Akwesasronon have experienced decades of environmental violence that stole our story and distanced us from the land. The theft of the story is a complex subject that will be investigated in this recounting of Akwesasronon relationships across time, which must be understood within its context specificity. For example, like to talk to the environmental and political history as well as the biocultural context. I see fear and anger as a byproduct of grief, and Akwesasne grieves from all the loss they've experienced. As a friend of mine, Smokey Sumac, said to me, those Haudenosaunee know how to grieve. Grieving was the main inspiration for the clan system. When somebody from one side of the house passes, the other side cares for them for 10 days so that they can experience and honor as well as heal from the grief. We have so much good medicine for helping people during this time because their fire has been scattered and the smoke enters their eyes, ears, and throat so they cannot see, hear, and speak with a good mind. We have tools for us to live healthy, and these are the tools for us to live healthy and happy lives. Still, there was a concerted effort to rob us of this knowledge through assimilation tactics, which continue to be supported by colonial systems. However, within Indigenous communities, we are witnessing a radical resurgence. Leanne Simpson described this as non-hierarchical relationships between land and bodies, bodies meaning the recognition of our physicality as political orders, and our intellectual practices, emotions, spirituality, and hubs of networked relationships. The reclamation of remembering who we are and celebrating this unapologetically is a complicated decolonial process. Still, the healing is happening and the shame is dissipating, a critical part of taking our story back. Colonial stories characterize Indigenous people as a part of the past or are focused on our trauma and lacking. Indigenous people are reclaiming their stories, and I choose to be part of this process. We must acknowledge the abuse dealt to Akwesasronon and Ganyak, but this cannot dominate the narrative because we lose stories of resistance. I prefer to hold both these stories in my hand, to acknowledge all my ancestors, family, and community that resisted every attempt to remove our bodies from this land and erase our stories. Akwesasne is Ganyak Geha, or Mohawk, for the land of the partridge drum, or an alternative translation speaks to the sound that the rapids made along Ganyak Daloanene. Due to environmental violence, the river no longer speaks to us. In the process of reclaiming the story or restoring, we are helping the river get back its voice and speak a future into existence. As all Akwesasronon, we are generative parts of our culture and essential to our cultural integrity and continuity. We are future ancestors, and the decisions we make today will affect future generations. So consider the story before us and let's change it. For this reason, I'm using an autoethnographic approach as a tool to situate my thinking and research and my purpose in relationship to the Ganyak Daloanene restoring. So a quick history lesson on Akwesasne. Situating the biocultural context. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy is composed of 6 nations: Seneca, Cayuga, Onondaga, Oneida, Mohawk, and Tuscarora. These nations comprise the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, which share similar cultural traditions, stories, and practices. However, the values and identity are different due to the context specificity. Like many Indigenous people, the Ganyakahaga traditions and narratives provide insight into conceptualizing Akwesasronon identity, values, and histories ingrained in our teachings and stories. For example, the Ohamdagaliwa Dakwa that I started this talk with, the creation story, the origin of the 4 sacred ceremonies, the history of the clans, the origin of the Great Law. As we draw attention to Akwesasne, there are specific stories that exist here on this land that we can go visit to reflect and connect. The importance of place must be expressed within our work because wisdom sits in places due to our land-based cultures. Environmentally, Akwesasne has a land base of approximately 14,600 acres of land in the northern portion and 7,400 acres of land in the southern portion, which is changing with land claims being brought to a conclusion. And these lands are affected by many rivers, Ganyak Daloanene, Grass, St. Regis, and Racket rivers. These many rivers were and continue to be a rich source of fish and identity. Before establishment, Ganyakahaga would travel to Akwesasne and seasonally grow crops, hunt, and fish. Akwesasne was and continues to be ecologically diverse and healthy, which supports high biodiversity and many species at various levels of risk. Akwesasronon are familiar with the impacts of environmental violence due to the widening of the river channels by St. Lawrence Seaway Project in 1954, which was closely followed by the Robert Saunders Dam's construction in 1957. The seaway and the dam disrupted the area's ecological processes, devoured islands, dislocated my people, and helped attract industry to this territory. A significant source of damage was from the concentrated industrial sector that developed along our territory's edge. It resulted in various environmental contaminants entering the ecosystem and affecting community health through fish consumption, which is well documented and researched. The health impacts connected with environmental contaminants were explored in various Akwesasronon demographics and were related to increased thyroid burden on youth, diabetes in adults, cardiovascular disease in adults, cognitive functioning in youth, cognitive functioning in adults, disruption of menarche in female youth, and lower testosterone in male adults. And the story continues. The early risk frameworks used to assess the impact of industry focused on direct contact exposure. It resulted in a small reparation amount for Akwesasne, but the cultural implications were not considered or outright ignored. Elizabeth Hoover conducted a research study in Akwesasne to understand the cultural impacts of the fish advisories on our biocultural context, which showed damages to the language, relationships, knowledge systems, values, and inability to fulfill roles and responsibility to the fish and water. However, in 2013, the resilience and determination of Akwesasronon with the support of allies produced a much more substantial reparation amount for use in habitat restoration as well as the tribal cultural restoration projects. Akwesasronon have and will always fight to fulfill their roles and responsibilities to the land, water, air, and all their relationships, as we were instructed. Politically, Akwesasne was established in 1755 when 100 Ganyankahaga moved from Ganawaga Indian Mission. Initially, they were part of Jada Nihumwenjage, also known as Seven Nations of Canada or the Seven Nations Fire. Today, Akwesasne is home to 3 governments. In the northern portion is the Mohawk Council of Akwesasne. In the southern portion is the St. Regis Mohawk tribe. Within the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, it is the holder of the fire for the Mohawk Nation. It is essential in this moment to acknowledge that MCA and SRMT are imposed governments by Canada and the United States. In 1888, Akwesasronon fought for the right to self-determine our futures and govern ourselves, shown through our adoption back into the Haudenosaunee. In 1898, and the Canadians passed the Indian Advancement Act of 1889, which did away with hereditary chiefs. The community continued to resist despite these statements made by the American and Canadian governments. However, resistance changed on May 1st, 1899, when the Canadian Dominion Police shot Jake Ice and other chiefs were imprisoned, which forced the traditional governance system in Akwesasne underground. Geopolitically, the unique location of Akwesasne along the US and Canadian border, as well as the intersection of 2 provinces, Ontario and Quebec, and a state, New York, presents complications for research, programming, partnership, daily life, and so much more. Walking through these histories allows us to know that Akwesasronon resisted and never stopped at every attempt to control us. I've only shared a small portion of this complex history to canvass that we are not passive recipients of oppression, and we will always keep fighting. Now, shifting our focus to the present, I often struggle with the present because there are so many questions that Akwesasronon want answered. And there are so many challenges to overcome to find those answers. I sit and listen to my people as they share their concerns with me and attempt to do my best to develop something to address these problems. Along the journey to defining a problem, there are always many more questions that arise and challenges. I particularly like to challenge how we approach questions and issues by ensuring that my people's knowledge is not stolen and used to establish careers for researchers without giving much back and removing and often mistranslating the knowledge outside its context. As Linda Smith famously says, the word itself, research, is probably one of the dirtiest words in the indigenous world's vocabulary. As a result, my people do not trust researchers, and rightfully so. This is why my research approach is community-based participatory action research that centers my community and prioritizes our knowledge and seeks to create change for us. The work I get to be part of through MCA's environment program is innovative, dynamic, and necessary. We are currently working to fill a data gap of fish contaminant loads noted along the southern shore of Cornwall Island, as well as addressing the confusing fish consumption throughout Akwesasne. I work with Dr. Lee McGaughy on the River Report, a project grounded in the Ohanda Galiwadekwa per Henry Licker's recommendation, which serves many purposes. One, a demonstration of respectful and meaningful engagement with Akwesasronon. Two, integration of and respect for Akwesasronon traditional ecological knowledge. And three, communicating the health status of the river that is relevant and accessible. This collaboration is a statement of the possibility that meaningful and participatory collaborations are possible and effective. Additionally, I work closely with our sister environmental agency at the St. Regis Mohawk Tribe, and we emphasize the importance of us working together across this imposed border as we address the complexity of the political and environmental challenges Akwesasne confronts. We made a lot of progress over the last year in our collaborations to address our confusing area of concern and seek to find creative solutions to these issues, which I see as opening the conversation to other dimensions of our ecology that has no respect for this imaginary line, much like myself. We have many more projects that we are engaged in, and I sit at a variety of tables that at times I cannot believe I am at. I use my voice to speak up for my community as much as possible. I like to remind partners of Akwesasne that Akwesasne can care for ourselves and be active and informed voices at decision-making tables. Gone are the days of paternalistic, unequal relationships. We have our own scientists, doctors, lawyers, politicians, teachers, and so much more. For example, I get to work with Dr. Ojisto Horn and her medical students to evaluate previous research in Akwesasne on the implications of environmental contaminants on Akwesasronon and the medical relevance of this information. We are here and making changes. For the future, I want to help facilitate the reclamation of our story by developing meaningful partnerships, innovative cross-cultural methodologies, utilizing Akwesasronon methodology, continuing to build capacity in Akwesasne, promote a resistance and unapologetic generation of Akwesasronon youth, and reignite an Akwesasronon remembering of our roles and responsibilities to all our relations. The process to achieve these goals is long and difficult. However, I did not fight my way through academia and life to back down from the barriers presented to me, just like my ancestors did. In looking to the future, we need to address the elephant in the room, climate change. I will not fear climate change. Instead, I will work to help strengthen my community against the implications associated with it. By adding to our capacity, by being adaptive within the environment program, conducting research and developing plans through a variety of research projects on Akwesasronon, perceptions of their holistic health implications in climate change. And also, we are working on Onega Asuan Tawadadi, or Talking Water. This is a collaborative project developed with Dr. Michael Twist and Dr. Sharon Moran. that seeks to anticipate climate refugees into this area and develop mechanisms to negotiate shared water resources amongst diverse populations to avoid conflict, xenophobia, and potential dispossession of Akwesasronon lands. However, this work must be preceded by the characterization of distrust that exists between academia and Akwesasronon. And that's where we begin, building our relationship, understanding each other. We are the future ancestors, and the decisions we make today will affect future generations. So consider the current story before us about the Ganyak Dalawanan. How will our future generations remember us? And will they be able to access the land, water, and all their relations? I believe that they will. Our ancestors are valuable parts of who we are, and they are not some obscure existence in the past. They are the generations that came before us. I think of the loved ones that are no longer with us, and the way they leave us with lessons that change how we walk and exist in this world. I'm still sorting out what this means to me, because there is grief there and a need to heal, which extends to all my relations, like the Ganyak Dalawanan. In closing, I would like to close with another quote by Simpson. There are those who will not see this as an expression of the complex systems of Anishinaabeg intelligence, as theory or intellect, or as a valid form of knowledge production. I will not apologize for this or qualify this or defend this, nor will I write this book in a way that might be more palatable to whiteness. There are those who will therefore position this work not as theory or an academic contribution, but as soft intellectual work or a narrative or creative nonfiction. The latter positioning is both racialized and gendered, and I have no desire to center whiteness and answer to their positioning. I choose to center Akwesasronon intelligence and come to understand Indigenous and have come to understand that Indigenous people don't owe Western science validation. Our knowledge is valid in its pure and raw form, and it deserves respect. Tuknigo. Nyawa.
Abe, thank you for that. That was amazing.
I kind of wanted to open it up for like conversation or questions. I know things kind of got really, I don't know, it was a lot of interesting thoughts, and some are still in formation, like my frustration with climate change, the or like the way that sustainability or the shared responsibility of climate change is just, I think there's so much wrong with how we discuss climate change, and I'm very careful on how sort of these global mechanisms speak to Indigenous inclusion. Like we have the answer, and we have some answers. I think that in reclaiming our reciprocal relationships with the land, that there's answers there, that there's respect, and that there's healing, and that if we are in good relationship and we understand our connection to land, that there's survival on the other side of that. So, and it was kind of this process of thinking about grief. I dedicate this paper to my grandmother, who passed at the end of September, and my father, who passed in June. I think they left these big holes in my life, and I'm trying to find the lesson and how they've changed the way that I walk on this land. And that's where I'm at. And I just took me a long time to write that, and I'm glad that this conference happened, so it forced me to produce it.
Abe, I'm so excited to have you here, and I'm so pleased that you went through with it today, and the way you expressed yourself came so nicely through. And I think it's, you know, a lot of what you shared today is what you've been sharing with me over the last year through our various conversations and meetings. And I'm so excited that everyone else gets to hear your voice and what you have to say. There's a great message just come in from Talking Wind, so Blake and Sinzin. They say, Neowin, thank you for sharing your knowledge, Abraham, sharing this vital information about the past, present, beautiful and inspiring words guiding us all into our collective future. And that, as I read it, I was like, oh, I'm so grateful that they posted on the chat. You know, it's just great to see to have them here. Of course, we had conversations with them as well, right? But thank you so much for doing this. I know that this has been a really tough year for you. And when your grandmother recently passed, we were all wondering, will Abe be able to pull this off? You know, will he be able to come and show up and give us his best side? And here you are doing exactly that. So I'm just so grateful that you did that. So thank you so much. And I think everything you had to say, I think it's now captured. So we're recording, of course, for those of you who are attending. And we have a full house, Abe. There are 76 people watching right now live. And I'm sure many more will watch again when we put the recording up. So there's a lot of thank yous coming in on the chat box. And I've got to keep hands on that too. So yeah, lots of people just saying well done to you. I don't see any questions coming in. I think everyone's just in awe right now, Abe, saying that's a job really well done. So thank you so much for doing this. It's really very, very special. Do you have any final words before I do a little bit of housekeeping and pass on to the next session?
I guess for me, like, thinking about like the past, present, and future, and thinking about my role in that and where I end up falling in relationship to this river, I just think about like my connection here. You know, that, you know, and talking about my grandmother and my father, when we were at the church for my grandmother's service, this man sat on the steps at the priest's house, and I could hear him telling a story, and he was like, I knew her, and we used to take the baskets across the river for them. And I remember this story she told us about how they used to do it at night, so the Indian agent didn't get his cut, or, you know, that she existed in a time before there was the bridge, before there was all this environmental contamination. And I always kind of like, I contemplate that, like, what kind of life was that? I mean, she lived to be 92 years old. And then I think about my father, and my father was a man of the river. He grew up fishing. He grew up working the river. And so, you know, and unfortunately, you know, the thing is that if we don't respect the river appropriately, it can take from us. And unfortunately, it did that to my father. And he was in an accident on the river, and he ended up in a wheelchair. And, you know, I've spent my entire life trying to understand what my father meant to me and the challenges in his life. And I continue to think about those things. And I think for myself, when I think of the river, I think of being this little kid going flip over rocks and trying to find like crayfish, or find like the newest, what I can remember as darters, or trying to catch a darter by hand as a little kid was like the hardest thing, but like the greatest accomplishment that I had. And that love and that excitement I had. And I never thought I was going to end up doing what I was doing, because unfortunately, as Indigenous people, sort of the trajectory you're given as an intelligent Indigenous person is to either become a doctor of medicine or a doctor of law, and I have no problem with that, but it's really strange to me how I ended up here, and I ended up with all this mentorship and this guidance from people around me, and I want my collaborators to know too, and the people that I share space with and conversations with, that our conversations become part of me, and they become part of how I choose to do my work. And that's why like autoethnography is really important to me. That's why story is so important to me. I reject this idea of like modern science being this subjective or this objective entity, and that like we love what we do, and it reflects in our work as scientists. And regardless of if I'm doing some sort of multivariate analysis or some geospatial analysis, there's still meaning in that. And there's like a tool in there that we can use to help listen to the voice of the river. And it's not one of the only tools. And I think we are in a period of time where, you know, we're all kind of grieving. You know, life this last year with dealing with COVID and the exhaustion of being 10 months in and the second wave arriving, I just want people to think about taking care of themselves, being patient, being kind to yourself. And remember too, like, nobody wins in this colonial system. We're all worked to the bone. We're all trying to pay these bills and work hella hard. But, you know, like, I just think that I feel like COVID is teaching us things, and I'm trying to listen, as frustrated as I am with what I've experienced during this time and the exhaustion, but I am taking time to care for myself, and I hope you all are as well.
Thank you so much, Abe. We have had at least one question come in. So it's from Kahenta Horn-Miller, and she says, your story is wonderful, well done. I have a question about getting more of our young people interested in STEM, so science and technology. How do we do this, and how do we make it relevant? And she followed up that question with students in the sciences. How do we get more of our young people involved in this? So do you want to take that on?
Yeah, actually, again, coming back to my story, in my undergraduate, I was trained to become a microbiologist. And the thing about being a microbiologist is about controlling every dimension which your bacteria are exposed to. And look, I love the idea of it. I love thinking about this microcosmic world. It made sense to me because it was like related to me. These bacteria are all over my body and they help me survive. And like, I was so into the human microbiome. I was thinking about like developing some sort of bacterial community that would break down PCBs into these compounds that didn't do anything anymore, or fix mercury. I don't know. I just had all these crazy ideas. And I realized that I wasn't meant for bench work. I'm definitely a community person. But in that journey through this, what STEM students are exposed to is a colonial way of thinking, and a very strict colonial way of thinking, that everything can be fixed, controlled, and quantified. If it can't be quantified, then it doesn't exist. And I think science, like more experienced scientists, see science as more malleable and changing, and you know that there's so much more to it, but the way that it's taught is in this very restricted manner. Now, the way that I see science being inspired in youth is noting the students that are excelling within those fields. You know, science isn't necessarily for everybody, and I think that's unfortunate, but we all are a part of these communities, and we all have these roles and responsibilities we fulfill. And some of our people are the thinkers, or the researchers, and other people have other responsibilities. So in this roundabout way, what I'm coming back to is we need to equip our youth with the tools to have decolonial thought. And I think a lot of our youth are already entering into that space. And when I was talking about critical resurgence, I see it here in Akwesasronon a lot. I remember growing up really ashamed. I'm kind of ashamed of being Mohawk. I thought our culture didn't matter. I thought our language didn't matter. I was like, I'm going to get educated and I'm going to get out of here. Because that's what, like, a lot of times the narrative that comes at us is like, you need to go. You need to get out. This place is wrong. There's so much wrong here. But when I went away, I learned how much I loved home. I learned how much I celebrate being here and being a part of this. But it was a combination of healing from my past traumas that I grew up with. It was a process of decolonizing my mind and learning what kind of tools I have available to me. But also, too, when I went into my graduate program, I remember thinking like, well, I'm not going to do all this touchy-feely business with like how I'm going to do my science or, you know, but instead I was like, I'm going to do very quantitative based things and I'm going to be very, you know, objective and all these things. But as I went through the process, I realized that we can't do that. And what's important is that we're citing Indigenous scientists that are talking about these things. We're breaking down the barriers between science and poetry even. We're getting really being holistic in how we approach these things and telling these youth that it's okay. And that when they confront a professor that is rejecting their thought and saying that it has no foundation, calling them out on that. Because I understand that to be laziness and an unwillingness to understand. Because, look, Kahane, you know that there's this beautiful and massive Indigenous knowledge in academia that has been created over, God, I can't even say how many years beyond like Linda Smith, but I know that her work was foundational and it just sent things in so many different ways. And I just think that like somehow getting youth inspired and connected and equipped with those tools at an earlier age, introducing them to these conversations, introducing them to their medicines prior to going to college, introducing them to ceremony, helping them learn that process. And all along the process too, you know, for their summer internships, I personally this summer was interested. We're always talking about, well, youth, we need youth input. Well, what I did was I set up this like 3-week education program, I don't know, proposal development thing. And I had this really wonderful time working with these youth. And I just presented on all these tools I've collected. And I said, here, now create something for Akwesasronon. And I got 10 really nice sort of project descriptions that were for here, that understood Akwesasronon, that were understanding who they are in relationship to their work and what this could look like. And it was awesome. I really appreciated it. So I know that was a really like kind of going all over the place with it. And this is something that I've been thinking about for a very long time. And I know I'm part of the reason that at some point in my life, I anticipate continuing to write and to produce